Signed the closing documents on a Tuesday morning, alone, at a small title company off Route 9, and by the time I got back to my car, I sat there for a long moment just looking at my hands. 63 years old, 31 years in that house, and I had just sold it without telling a single person in my family. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a vindictive woman. I raised my son the best I could after his father passed. I kept the yard, paid the taxes, fixed the roof twice, and never once asked him for a dime. I was not the kind of mother who called every day or showed up uninvited or made her son feel guilty for building his own life. I gave him room. I gave him everything, really. And then one Sunday in October, at a dinner I had cooked entirely by myself, he sat across from me at my own table and told me what was going to happen to my home. I need to back up. My husband, Gene, died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and cruel, the way that particular disease tends to be. We had 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral, and most of those weeks I spent just trying to keep up with what the doctors were saying. Gene handled the finances in our marriage. Not because I couldn't. I ran the bookkeeping for a pediatric dental office for 22 years, but because he liked doing it, and I let him. And then suddenly he was gone, and I was standing in our kitchen at 2 a.m. reading through folders I had never opened. The house was paid off. That was the good news. Gene had been meticulous about that. We had a small investment account, Social Security coming to me in a few years, and the house, which an agent told me in passing was probably worth somewhere around $410,000, maybe more depending on the market. My son Hank came to help me go through Gene's paperwork that first month. He's a good-looking man, my son. He has Gene's jawline and my stubbornness, and for the first year after his father died, he called me every Sunday and drove up once a month, and I was grateful. I was so grateful I didn't notice when the calls started to slow down. I didn't notice when the monthly visits became quarterly and then less than that. What I noticed instead was that his wife, whom I will call my daughter-in-law, had started referring to my house in a particular way. It started small. Comments at Christmas. This place is so big for just one person. Or, wouldn't you feel safer somewhere with neighbors closer by? She would say these things in a tone that sounded like concern, and maybe at first it was. But there is a certain kind of concern that is really just a preview of a plan, and I started to recognize it. My daughter-in-law is not a bad person in the conventional sense. She is efficient, organized, and very certain about what is best for other people. She manages a dental practice, funny enough, so we have that background in common, though she has never seemed interested in talking about it. What she is interested in, what she has always been interested in, is the future. Her future. The house where she and Hank might raise children. The equity in the property that sat at the end of my cul-de-sac. They had been married 6 years when Gene died. I had known her for 7. In those 7 years, I can count on one hand the number of times she called me without a reason. Not that she was ever unkind. She was perfectly pleasant in the way that some people are pleasant, the way a waiting room is pleasant. Temperature controlled, appropriate, but without any real warmth underneath it. After Gene passed, she started calling more. That surprised me. She would ask how I was doing, whether I needed anything, whether I had thought about next steps. I appreciated it. I told myself I had misjudged her. Then one afternoon, maybe 8 months after Gene's funeral, my daughter-in-law asked if she could come see the house. Just to help me think through some things, she said. I made tea. She walked through every room. She paused in the doorway of what had been my son's childhood bedroom, the one that still had the old navy curtains I kept meaning to replace. And she said this would make such a perfect nursery. She wasn't pregnant. She said it the way someone says it when they are already decorating in their head. I handed her tea and didn't say anything. I started paying closer attention after that. In the months that followed, I noticed that when Hank called, he sometimes brought up the house in a way that felt scripted. Mom, that yard must be hard to keep up. Mom, do you really need 4 bedrooms? Mom, have you thought about what Gene would have wanted for you? That last one bothered me the most because Gene would have wanted exactly what I wanted, to stay in my home on my terms for as long as I chose. I did not say any of this out loud. I just listened and said things like, I'll think about it and you might be right. And then I went about my days. I have a friend named Claudine who has known me since our daughters were in the same brownie troupe, back when I still had a daughter. before I lost her to a car accident the year she turned 24. Claudine is one of those women who notices things and does not pretend otherwise. She came over one evening in late spring, and I told her what had been going on. Not all of it, just the outline. She listened. She stirred her coffee. Then she said, "Ruthie, you know what's happening, right?" I said I thought so. She said, "What are you going to do about it?" I didn't know yet, but I started thinking. I called my accountant, who referred me to an estate attorney, a woman named something with a K. I won't use her real name, who had an office downtown above a shoe repair shop and who, within our first meeting, made me feel like I had finally met someone who was actually on my side. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated more than I can say. She walked me through my options. I could put the house in a trust. I could add a co-owner condition. I could sell. She was careful not to push me in any direction. But she asked me one question that I have not stopped thinking about since. She said, "Ruth, if your son and his wife moved into this house tomorrow, what would your daily life look like?" I thought about it. I thought about the nursery comment. I thought about the scripts. I thought about mornings in my kitchen with my coffee and my crossword puzzle and the particular quiet I had learned to stop grieving and start protecting. I said, "I don't think I'd have one, a daily life, I mean." She nodded like she already knew. I listed the house in August. I chose an agent Jean had once used for a rental property, a quiet, professional man who did not ask me unnecessary questions. We priced it right, showed it twice, and had a contract within 11 days. The buyers were a young couple relocating from out of state. She was a nurse. He taught high school. They loved the yard. They asked if they could keep the rose bushes Jean had planted along the back fence, and when the agent told me that, I cried a little in a way that surprised me. The closing was set for the third Tuesday of October. My son called me on the Sunday before and asked if I'd be free for dinner. He wanted to bring my daughter-in-law. He had something he wanted to talk to me about. Those were his exact words. Something he wanted to talk to me about. I said, of course. I said, "Come over Sunday." I cooked a chicken, made mashed potatoes, cut up a salad. I set the table with the good placemats. They arrived at 6. My daughter-in-law was wearing a dress I had not seen before, something floral, which seemed deliberate, the way you wear something cheerful when you are about to deliver news. You expect someone to need softening for. We ate. The conversation was pleasant. We talked about their friends, about Hank's job, about the weather turning. My daughter-in-law mentioned twice how well the garden was looking, as if noting it for a record. Then, over the last of the chicken, my son set down his fork and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as prepared. He said that he and my daughter-in-law had been doing a lot of thinking. He said they had been talking about the future, about their plans, about how much they loved this house, and how much Jean had loved it, and how much it would mean to keep it in the family. He said they thought it would be wonderful, actually really wonderful, if they could move in sometime in the new year, just to be close, to be nearby, to take care of things. He said his wife had some ideas about the upstairs. He said they had been thinking about the nursery. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine, and he said, "Mom, we want to be here for you." I looked at his hand on mine. I looked at my daughter-in-law, who was watching me with an expression that I can only call patient, the way you are patient with someone when you believe the outcome has already been decided. I picked up my water glass and I took a sip. A long, slow sip. Then I said, "Hank, I think there's been a miscommunication somewhere. I sold the house." Neither of them moved. My son said, "What?" I said, "I sold the house. The closing is Tuesday morning. The buyers are a young couple. They're moving in by the end of the month." My daughter-in-law made a sound that I cannot describe exactly. It was not quite a word. My son said, "Mom, what are you talking about? You can't just... When did this happen? Why didn't you say anything?" I said I'd listed it in August and it sold quickly. I said I hadn't said anything because the house was mine and the decision was mine, and there was nothing to say until there was a contract. And then once there was a contract, I suppose I had just been waiting for the right moment. He said, "The right moment? Mom, we had a plan." I want to be precise about that word. We and plan. I said gently as I knew how, "Hank, I didn't know about a plan. No one asked me about a plan. No one asked me about a plan." My daughter-in-law found her voice. She said it was a lot of money. And what was I going to do with that kind of money, and had I thought this through? She said it in a tone that was trying hard to sound reasonable, but was really just trying to regain footing on ground that had already shifted. I told her I had thought it through quite carefully with a lawyer over the course of several months. My son got up and walked to the window. He stood with his back to us. I looked at his shoulders and I thought for just a moment about when he was small, about how he used to fall asleep watching television and I would carry him to bed, about all the ways you can love someone and still not let them run over you. He turned around. He said, "Where are you going to go?" I told him I had already found a place, a 2-bedroom condominium on the other side of town in a building with a small courtyard and a community room and neighbors who kept reasonable hours. I'd put down a deposit. It was mine. It was manageable. It was going to be good. He said that sounded lonely. I thought about the morning quiet I had been protecting for 3 years. I thought about Claudine, who lived 12 minutes from the new condo. I thought about the attorney above the shoe repair shop who had asked me the one right question. I said, "I don't think it will be." The dinner ended not long after that. My daughter-in-law was quiet in a way that was very loud. My son hugged me at the door, a tight hug that felt like an argument he had decided not to have yet. I sat on the porch and watched their taillights until they were gone. Then I went back inside, poured myself a small glass of the red wine I had been saving for something, and sat down at the kitchen table. The kitchen smelled like chicken and warm bread and all 31 years of my life in that house. I was going to miss it. I knew that. I was going to miss it the way you miss things that were genuinely good, not the manufactured kind of missing that my son and daughter-in-law had been counting on to make me manageable. The closing was on Tuesday. I went alone, wore my good gray blazer, signed everything the attorney had reviewed with me 3 times. The escrow check was the largest single number I have ever held in my hand. I sat in my car afterward and looked at my hands again, the same way I had the first time I imagined doing this months ago, before I knew for certain I would go through with it. Hank called me that evening. He was calmer. He said he was sorry he had reacted the way he had. He said he just wished I had told him. I said I understood that. I also said that the reason I hadn't told him was that I had been afraid, not of him exactly, but of the pressure, the very particular kind of pressure that comes from people who love you and want things from you at the same time, and how hard it is to hold your ground when both of those things are happening at once. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did you not trust me?" That question was honest, and it deserved an honest answer. I said, "I trusted that you loved me, Hank. I just wasn't sure yet whether you saw me." He didn't have an answer for that. Neither of us said much after. We said goodnight. We said we would talk soon, and I believed it, because underneath everything, my son is not a bad person. He got caught somewhere between his wife's ambitions and his own discomfort with conflict, and I know that place because I spent decades in it myself, before Jean died and I had no choice but to learn to stand up straight on my own. I moved into the condominium on a Friday. 2 of Claudine's sons helped me with the boxes. My furniture fit better than I expected. The courtyard had a small fountain, and my bedroom window faced east, so I wake up now to light before anything else. My neighbor on the left is a retired school librarian named something I won't share here, and she knocks on my door sometimes on Saturday mornings with muffins she has made from scratch and opinions about the books she has just finished. And I pour the coffee and we sit at my little table by the window, and I think that this is what it feels like when your life is actually yours. My daughter-in-law has not called since the dinner. My son calls on Sundays again, like he used to. We are finding our way back to something, slowly, the way you do when something real has happened between people, and everyone has to decide whether the relationship is worth the work of honesty. I think it is. I think he does too. The rose bushes, I was told by the agent, are doing well. The young couple sent a card through the agent's office, which was not something I expected. They said the house felt like a home the moment they walked in. They said they hoped whoever had lived there before had been happy. I wrote back through the agent. I told them yes. I told them we had been very happy there for a very long time, and that I hoped they would be too. Then I sealed the envelope, walked down to the mailbox in the courtyard, listened to the fountain for a moment, and went upstairs to make my coffee and start my day.